Hey everyone, today I am in Amish Country, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, a few miles south of Lancaster City in Strasburg, and we are going to ride the rails of the Strasburg Rail Road in today's video. We are going to take the ride twice. First, we are going to ride it on an indoor coach car, and then because the weather, I think the rain's going to hold off here. But because the weather is pretty nice and it's kind of hot outside, I think we'll come back in the open air car and do a second ride. It will be two 45-minute rides through the Amish countryside. I hope you enjoy it. Please do me a favor, like, comment, and subscribe.
It was given to the Strasburg Rail Company by an act of the Pennsylvania Legislature on June 9, 1832. For almost 200 years, our little railroad has been servicing the community of Strasburg. This is not an enterprise that sprung up yesterday, folks. Many generations of passengers have boarded these coaches before you did today. Coming into view on the left-hand side of our train, just past these freight cars, you'll see some old rusty engines sitting on what's commonly known as a graveyard track. But don't worry, folks, these engines have not been abandoned. They are just simply awaiting their turn for steam restoration inside our shops, which is known for the work nationwide. Behind those engines, off in the distance, are some rows of neat little cabooses. Those cabooses belong to the Red Caboose Lodge, a privately operated hotel where you can spend the night in a real-life caboose that used to service one of the many railroads here in the United States. Behind that is the National Toy Train Collection Museum. That museum has toy trains of all shapes, sizes, colors, and ages. It's truly a great place for those who are young and for those who are young at heart. Fairview Crossing is next. Fairview. Is one of the oldest public utilities in all of Pennsylvania. In fact, it's the oldest railroad in operation on the western hemisphere of our globe. Back in 1958, 24 dedicated railroad buffs purchased the line, cleared from bankruptcy and abandonment. Back in 1958, when we began tourist operations, we didn't have all the rail equipment that you now see today. Back then, we only had one little engine, called a Plymouth. It weighs 20 tons, burns gasoline, and has the number 1 painted on it.
So I decided on my first ride I would do the coach car, which maybe wasn't the best idea. This is the most affordable of the cars, save about $2 from the open air car, but the windows only go a certain height up, so I'm pretty tall and I'm not getting much of a breeze, but also it's hard for me to really get video and pictures out the window. My second ride of the day, I'm going to be using the open air car, so I should have a much better view of all the scenery and I can show you a lot more that way. So we haven't even started my second trip of the day yet, and I can already tell that open air is going to be much nicer. It was really hot. It got really warm in the coach car, and here in the open air car, there is just a nice breeze, and we haven't even started moving yet. But as you can see, instead of having the window block things that I'm trying to get on camera, I'm gonna have a much better range of motion here and show you more of the scenery. That's one of the reasons that I did the coach car first, was because I thought it would be easier to hear some of the narration, so I could let you know a little more about what was actually happening and what we were seeing when I had a better look at it the second time. If you're wondering, the coach car is about $2 cheaper than open air. So if you're only doing one on your trip, I would recommend open air. I know there are also first class that are $12 more than open air, and those are air conditioned and there's windows that you can't open. But I think that at least in the summer when the weather is nice and a breeze will help, I think that these open air cars are really the way to try to see everything. One really cool feature about these trains here on the Strasburg Rail Road is the seats. So this is the open air car, as I've mentioned, and we are going to be heading this way, in this direction, east, to go to Paradise, Pennsylvania. Then once we get to Paradise, that's when they're going to put the front of the car on the back, and we're gonna head back the other way. So when that happens, if you want to, you can change the bench, and then you can look this way, because that's the way the train's going to be moving.
Oxford and Southern, we used to call her Little, Old, and Slow. The railroad was abandoned in 1918, and the scrappers took up the rail so quickly that they stranded old number 6 out on the line with no way to get back. Sometimes we blow our whistle for Carpenter's Crossing. The ghost of old number 6 will answer us back. Now, listen closely. Maybe she'll answer us today.
Graveyard, Lancaster County's oldest cemetery. Behind those gates is where one of our first settlers was laid to rest. An 18th century French Huguenot named Marie. After fleeing their native France to avoid religious persecution, Marie and a small group of followers were given an audience with Queen Anne, thanks to an English philosopher, Quaker, and lifetime advocate of religious freedom, William Penn. They were granted 2.5 square miles of land and arrived here in 1712, and the name they gave their new home is Paradise. 1861, when President-elect Abraham Lincoln made a short stop in Lancaster County on the way to his Washington inauguration. Thousands gathered around these tracks just to see a glimpse of Mr. Lincoln, who stepped out, faced the crowd, and said,
I've come to see you and let you see me. I believe I have the better of the bargain.
The crowd was equally enthusiastic to see Mary Todd Lincoln. When she stepped out and stood beside her much taller husband, Lincoln eloquently quipped,
Now you can see the long and short of it.
Sadly, in 1865, another train would pass through Lemon Place, but in the opposite direction, this one carrying President Lincoln's body after his untimely death at the hands of John Wilkes Booth. Ladies and gentlemen, we have reached our destination of Paradise, Pennsylvania, located along Route 30 in eastern Lancaster County. We'll be here for just a few minutes while we switch our locomotive around to the opposite end of our train for the return trip.
So I actually rode in the second open air car, but the first open air car is called the Hello Dolly. And that is just not a nod to old school pop culture. No, this train car was actually in the movie version of Hello Dolly, and now it is here fully operational as part of the Strasburg Rail Road. What a fun visit to the Strasburg Rail Road. This is a great place to take a family. I think it's one of those things, you know, starting this channel being a lot about Walt Disney World, and Walt Disney World is a place that tries to appeal to everybody from the grandkids to the grandparents. And this is a place that does that as well. Kids love trains. And there are a lot of older people who I think like the historic nature of this, sort of going back to what feels like a simpler time. And it is a nice, relaxing ride through Amish Country, and I definitely recommend it as part of a greater trip to Pennsylvania or the Mid-Atlantic area. You might not realize it, but we're only about an hour and a half, an hour 20 minutes from Baltimore, less than an hour and a half from Philadelphia. So a place like this would be a nice little stop off on a vacation to any one of those locations. Do me a favor, like, comment, subscribe. I'll talk to you soon.